Hey guys, welcome to another banner review video for Xcaliblur Global. In this video, I'll be covering the upcoming banner, the Get Together banner that features Nungal and Nergal, both of which fall under the Hangman's faction. Now I'll start off with Nungal because she's a character that I'm more familiar with. I've had Nungal since very close to the beginning of the game. With Nungal, she actually has two very viable builds and I'll quickly cover both of them, and I'll cover a little bit about my thoughts on her at the end of the video as well. The first is the build that I'm mainly using, which is the basic attack build. It may not sound very fancy or powerful, but the key thing about Nungal is she has a lot of passives and supports that help boost her basic attack. For one thing, her fatal attack rank 9 basic attack already increases her crit damage by 15%. She has the ability to enter into sniping stance. Sniping stance is a stance where you lose all mobility, so your move becomes 0, but in return it gives you 2 additional tile of range, and it also increases your attack and crit by another 15%. Very importantly is her passive at rank 7, the Shattering Arrow. This allows her basic attack to ignore 40% of the target's defense, and honestly in this game, ignoring defense is one of the best ways to get damage through, particularly in endgame content where enemies tend to be up to level 70 and outlevel you. Ignoring 40% of their defense stat actually counts for a lot of additional damage. Finally, she also has Eagle Eye on rank 11. This is an instant skill that gives Nungal additional 1 range and increases her physical attack by 10% as well, while giving her the Highlander advantage for every attack that she does. All this is already pre-built into Nungal, and obviously if you have other support units such as Cocoa or maybe Inanna to give her Princess Prayer, Nungal can actually output some seriously heavy damage just using basic attacks. The fact that Sniping Stance and Eagle Eye also increases her range, in total if you use both of them, increases her range by 3, means that she can easily snipe enemy units from far away, practically almost the entire screen away, and they'll likely die before they can even get close to you. One thing to mention about Nungal is that she's a little bit different than your magical DPS, and this comes in the form of her trait. Nungal's damage calculation factors in physical attack and not magical attack. However, the damage that's inflicted on the enemy is magical damage and will be boosted, say for example by Edda. The important distinction though is that with Nungal, you always want to boost her physical attack stat and not magical attack, because again that's the one that's taken into account when she does her damage. The other build that Nungal has is the one focused on Deadly Aim, which is her rank 3 nuke. Deadly Aim is very energy hungry, it requires 4 energy to use, and it also normally requires Nungal to prepare for 1 turn before unleashing the attack at the start of her next turn. This attack is also boosted if the enemy has the Hangman's Mark debuff on them, and so if you have another unit that can land the debuff, Safiya of course is a great example, where Safiya's trait allows her to automatically land that debuff. It makes it easier I guess to meet this conditional. I have tested this build as well, and honestly I think the damage is about the same as a basic attack build. Of course a lot of it factors into what sort of support that Nungal has, but for this to work, Nungal requires ways to replenish energy, because 4 energy is pretty steep for a nuke that you want to spam as quickly as possible. Luckily, Nungal has a rank 7 skill called the Sense of Purpose that allows her to recover 1 additional energy when she lands a critical hit, and with Nungal, almost all her attacks should be critical hits. On rank 11, she also gains access to Quick Reload, which also restores energy for Nungal, and importantly reduces skill cooldown by 1 turn. This allows her to greatly reduce the cooldown of Deadly Aim and potentially give you the ability to spam Deadly Aim if you have other supports to also help further reduce her cooldown and give her energy. Interestingly, Quick Reload will also enable you to use Deadly Aim without the need to prepare for 1 turn, which means that under the right setup with Nungal, assuming her quick reload passive is up and you have ways to support her energy regen. She can output some disgustingly high damage with deadly aim. One other important factor about deadly aim is that it doesn't require line of sight. It just takes purely range into account. As long as the enemy is within range, it doesn't matter how many obstacles there are, and once Nungal locks onto the target, she will hit the target the next turn. This is in stark contrast with her basic attack build, where obviously with basic attacks using a crossbow, it does require line of sight, and crossbow line of sight can be pretty tricky. So before going into Nergal, just want to cover my thoughts about Nungal. She has really two viable builds. The question most people will be asking is which build is better. Honestly, I think both are roughly on equal grounds. It just depends on what sort of playstyle that you have and what sort of support characters you have for Nungal. There are pros and cons to both, and the sad thing about this most of all is that if you want to carry both builds, you do need very heavy custodial investment, which means it's probably better that if you want to use Nungal is to make a decision beforehand which build you want to go for and then just go for that. And then in the future, if you have Castella to special, you can maybe try to open the other one. But if I'm not mistaken, it takes about 3 Castellas to unlock all the necessary skills for the other build. And the damage output is almost the same, so really might as well just go for whichever one you enjoy playing more and go for that. The one that I use more is the basic attack build because I don't really like to worry about energy, and I don't have that many characters that can restore energy at this point. Depending on your roster, obviously things might be different. The basic attack build damage can be pretty high as well, and although it does rival deadly aim without requiring energy, the trade-off you have for that is that, like I said, it has line of sight, and sometimes it is pretty tricky lining up. You can shoot through allies, but you can't shoot through inanimate objects such as fences and barrels, and you can't shoot through enemy units. So if all the enemy units are in a line, you can only hit the first enemy unit in that line. This also requires her to go into sniping stance to increase the damage and range, and the sniping stance itself can be pretty awkward to use. Once you enter sniping stance, your mobility drops to 0, you can't move every turn. You can switch back to her normal stance, but the turn that you switch to normal stance, you will not be able to attack with Nungal. So ideally speaking, if you go for the basic attack build, you want to position Nungal in a place where she can hit almost all the enemy units without having to move. And that can't be the same for, that can't be said for every single stage layout out there. Now deadly aim doesn't require line of sight, and you have full mobility with Nungal. Although she's not the most mobile unit in the roster in the field, but at least you can still move around with her and use deadly aim where you see fit. But it does require 4 energy, and normally it has a 2-turn cooldown. So my recommendation, if you do want to play the deadly aim build, you need to try to see how to support Nungal in her energy gain and cooldown reduction. Deadly aim also greatly benefits from Hangman's mark, so you ideally also want a way to consistently apply the mark across enemy units. One key thing is that if you're still having trouble with weapon trial 1, Nungal absolutely dominates weapon trial 1. In fact, if you go the basic attack build, you can cheese the entire stage. I have a video on that as well in my channel in case you're interested. But essentially, the extra range from her basic attack build allows her to outrange the boss on weapon trial 1, and she can just sit back and slowly shoot the boss down. She's all the damage that you need. Even at the level 70 trials, you don't need any other DPS, but she obviously does need support to pump out damage at the level 70 endgame stages. With regards to whether or not to pull for Nungal, the thing that she excels the most obviously is range. So if you're interested in playing a sniping sort of unit, then she's a great pickup. She also does magical DPS, even though she uses her physical attack stat for that. But overall, I would say her damage wouldn't stand out versus other top tier magical DPS. So if you really feel you're comfortable enough with your magical DPS roster now, then you don't really need to go for Nungal. I mean, range is good and all, but does it justify pulling one unit just for range? That is a decision that you really have to decide. So that's it for Nungal. Moving on to Nergal. Nergal is a defender in the Hangman's faction as well, and a lot of people tend to make fun of Nergal, and he sits pretty low in tier list. That being said, he does have pretty nice utility across his skills, and the main reason people would want to pull for Nergal is to have access to this utility. His key utility actually comes at rank 1 in the fast cover, where he swaps positions with an ally up to 3 tile of range away, and he grants both himself and the ally that he swapped with a physical shield as well. So essentially, Nergal's one of his most common utility, I should say, is going around the field swapping positions with units, and this way you can have your squishier units go up to the front, attack the enemy, and then have Nergal swap positions with them so that they go back to the back row, whereas Nergal will sit at the front. That is, I guess, a common use case for him. Using his fast cover also gives him the cover cover assist ability, but only on all allies within a 1 tile radius. So it is lower radius compared to your typical cover assist tanks such as Maita. With regards to his other utility, they all are actually pretty good as well. I especially like his rank 3 one as well, which is sort of an AoE debuff where he casts the Mark Illumination in a line and it lands the Hangman's Mark, so that's actually pretty good for Nungal. And it also debuffs the enemy with attack down and vulnerable. So this is a pretty juicy debuff, and it's also instant move, so you could do this and then do one of his other utility skills right after. Notably, this rank 3 skill also doesn't require energy, so you can save your energy for the other skills and still get to use this once its cooldown is done. He has a pretty interesting rank 5 reaction where if he ever goes into dying status, he gets a 1 turn dodge that doesn't expire until his next turn, and he also heals 50% of his HP. So in a way, that could be a way for him to come back into battle, but it is pretty tricky, so this is very niche. It only triggers when he's in dying status, and there are many times when units can just one-shot him from injured or maybe even from healthy down to KO. If that happens, this passive will not trigger and he just remains dead. So the thing I don't like about this is that it's a little bit unreliable, and it has of course a pretty long cooldown, which I guess is understandable for a passive that revives you. At rank 11, he gets the close quarter release, and this is actually the best knockback skill in the game in terms of range of knockback. Close quarter release allows him to knock back a unit by 4 tiles, which does have its uses across some stages. 4 tiles essentially, as long as there's a ledge in a stage, allows him to use that to instant knock down an enemy unit down the ledge. And obviously in PvP he can be very scary because you need to position your units very carefully, because it's easy for Nergal to swap position with someone else, get into range, and then use close quarter release to instantly knock one of your team off the ledge. The drawback out of all his skills, if you look at it, is the long cooldowns, and this is one of the reasons why he's rated pretty low on the tier list. The only one that is sort of okay is the fast cover, where it's 2 turn cooldown. I mean, 2 turn cooldown isn't exactly stellar in the first place, but the rest of his skills absolutely is abysmal in comparison. Mark Illumination is 4 turns cooldown, his rank 5 reaction is 7 turns, and close quarter release is 5 turns cooldown. So in fast matches where it's 5 or 6 turns long in duration, you really only at best see him use his skill once, and in many cases, in PvP where people will pick counter units, he will likely die before doing anything, and at most, even if he does something, it will then be on a long cooldown timer and he gets picked off before he recovers from that. So not the most dependent of allies. If you want to use him, it's really just, in my opinion, going for the fast cover, and then the rest is just icing on top. If you get the opportunity, sure, you can use one or two of them to turn the tides of battle, but fast cover is, I guess, the main use for Nergal. One other thing I forgot to mention is Nergal's trait, which is the Luxite Gauntlet. This allows him to get a stacking buff each time he ends his turn, where it decreases the damage taken by 10%. So as long as he doesn't get hit at the end of the turn, he gets more and more damage reduction buff, but the moment he gets hit, he will remove stacks from this. So as you walk up to the enemy unit, the idea is that he builds these stacks and become pretty tanky, and then he can use his fast cover to swap positions with allies and tank upcoming hits. Once he takes a hit, he gets an opposite stack, so-called, where he gets a stack of 10% damage increase, where he can deal more damage with his abilities. So that being said, though, he isn't really a DPS character. I mean, I guess if you build enough of his offensive stacks, he can do some nice damage, but that requires him to take multiple hits. So you have to plan very carefully, use his fast cover to keep getting shields so that he can sustain attacks and build up his offensive stacks that way. All put together, I think he's really pretty slow overall. In a practical situation, you won't see much use of his other skills, so I guess pull him if you want the utility, but don't expect him to cover assist as well as Baita, take as many hits as much as some of the other defenders. But he's a defender with utility role, so it's a bit different versus other defenders so far. So coming on to summary on Nergal, I think I mentioned all of this before already. So his utility in shields, knockbacks and debuff is pretty nice when it connects, and how often it connects is the problem with Nergal. So the long cooldown makes it very, very difficult to use. If you use it wrongly, it's sort of like a wasted skill and you have to wait many turns for it to cool down again. Obviously, if you have ways to reduce cooldown for him, it does matter, but currently in the game, most abilities we have only reduces cooldown by 1 turn, which is not nearly enough. You have to stack this multiple times in order to get more utility out of him, and I don't really think it's worth that much effort just to make him work. In some stages, his utility can be absolutely broken, obviously, and that's usually the case with pretty niche sort of utility, but that's the word for him. He is really pretty niche. The other characters that has utility will fit more scenarios, and you really only want to bring him into battle where the stage loadout or the enemies really suits his skills. So that's it for this video. Hope it's been helpful, and till then, I'll catch you guys in the next banner review video. Bye!